The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. Former FBI Director James Comey indicted days after President Trump pressured the Attorney General to bring the case, the charges he faces. Plus,
the agenda of President Trump has caused tremendous outrage among many people on the extreme left.
Another deadly attack in what at least one top Trump administration official calls an act of political violence.
We talked about TikTok and he gave us the go-ahead.
TikTok deal approved. After months of uncertainty, Trump signs an order to keep the popular platform available in the U.S. What the American spin-off of the app will look like. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for being here. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we begin with the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey on perjury charges stemming from the testimony he gave Congress almost 5 years ago. As national correspondent Matt Gelka tells us, it is the next step in a pressure campaign from the president.
The president celebrated the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey.
It's about justice, really. It's not revenge. It's about justice. It's also about the fact that you can't let this go on. They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it. And Comey was one of the people. He wasn't the biggest, but he's a dirty cop.
Comey was indicted Thursday following pressure from Trump and ahead of a statute of limitations deadline next week. Comey faces 2 counts, making a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding, and has said he's innocent.
I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does.
The charges stem from 2020 testimony from Comey. He was asked about older testimony from 2017 when he said he did not authorize any leaks about Russian-related investigations into then-candidates Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Former Comey deputy Andrew McCabe said he was authorized to leak in 2018.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
Comey's lawyers may argue this is all politically motivated in a trial, but the reputational damage and costs might be good enough for a president who has vowed to go after perceived enemies.
It's an expensive endeavor. DOJ is bringing the full might of the federal government behind this case. It will be an expensive and time-consuming and also very stressful situation for any defendant.
Comey could face a maximum of 5 years in prison if convicted. His arraignment is scheduled for October 9th. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is now ordering the military's top brass to gather in Quantico, Virginia next Tuesday. President Trump pushing back against security concerns, telling reporters the move is a good thing.
Remember, I'm the president of peace. It's good to get along. It's good. You act like this is a bad thing. Isn't it nice that people are coming from all over the world to be with us?
Government data shows that amounts to at least 800 officers, with many of them coming in from their deployments around the world. The family of one of the passengers killed in the midair collision outside Washington, D.C. earlier this year is suing the government and the air carrier involved. The lawsuit filed on behalf of Rachel Crafton, whose husband was on board the jet when it collided with an Army helicopter outside Reagan National Airport in January. The suit is aimed at the FAA, the Army, American Airlines, and its regional partner for wrongful death and negligence. The FBI is investigating a shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas, Texas, as a targeted act of violence against federal agents. We bring you team coverage. Kayla Gaskins digs deeper into the growing trend of political violence plaguing America. But first, the shooting in Texas Wednesday marks the latest example of anti-ICE attacks escalating across the nation. From opening fire at ICE facilities to hitting officers with cars, the increase in assaults continues to skyrocket. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, takes a closer look at the numbers.
In June, the Department of Homeland Security reported its first significant surge in assaults on ICE officers, a 500% increase. But now, 90 days later, that number has over doubled. DHS reporting as of September, assaults increased 1,000%. As for ICE facilities, there have been multiple attacks within the last few months alone, including bomb threats, active shooters, and coordinated attacks by rioters. Border Czar Tom Homan repeatedly saying inappropriate rhetoric plays a major factor.
The rhetoric against the men and women of ICE is skyrocketing.
The most recent attack happening Wednesday at the same ICE field office in Dallas that received a bomb threat in August. A sniper killing a detainee while injuring 2 others. FBI officials saying ammunition with, quote, anti-ICE messages were found at the scene. Another happening on July 4th when a group of rioters attacked an ICE detention center in Alvarado, Texas, shooting and injuring an officer.
Unfortunately, we see this kind of violence out on our streets every day.
Following the attack in Dallas, California Governor Gavin Newsom under renewed fire for signing and promoting the No Secret Police Act, which would ban law enforcement from protecting their identities to keep them from being targeted and doxxed online.
These are not just authoritarian tendencies. These are authoritarian actions by an authoritarian government.
Less than 24 hours after those comments, a spokesperson for Newsom condemning the attack in Texas, writing in part, quote, "We must continue advocating for peace and justice in times of division." Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance says the attacks on law enforcement, specifically ICE, must stop, calling out rhetoric from the Democratic Party.
But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell.
Now, as ICE attacks continue to rise, researchers from the University of Maryland also finding in the first half of 2025, 35% of extremist-related violence targeted U.S. government personnel or facilities. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Lawmakers in North Carolina have approved a new bill that reforms the state's criminal justice system and opens the door for the restart of executions. The bill, dubbed Irina's Laws, in response to the murder of 23-year-old Irina Zarutska on a Charlotte light rail train last month. If signed into law, the package would limit bail options and would ensure more defendants undergo mental health evaluations. It would also put an end to the state's nearly 20-year halt on executions. A Virginia Tech chapter of Turning Point USA held a vigil in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin and Megyn Kelly delivered remarks to a packed auditorium of students.
A sniper's bullet, shot from a gun, held by someone with a heart of evil, tried to silence truth. Tried to silence all of us. But you see, the exact opposite is happening. The exact opposite is happening.
The campus enforced strict security measures, which included a ban on bags and cameras. This week, President Trump signed an executive order paving the way for American investors to buy TikTok from China for roughly $14 billion. And China has apparently agreed. He asked whether he's confident in the security and privacy of Americans' data.
I really am.
It will push disruptive.
The biggest reason is that it's owned by Americans, and very sophisticated Americans, and people that love the country, and very smart Americans too. So they don't want anything like that to happen.
Trump says a group of American investors will control the algorithm, leaving the future of the app's layout and content recommendations up in the air. The algorithm is the crucial feature of the popular video sharing app, recommending videos based on user activity. Trump insists the algorithm will be fair to both sides and not favor any sort of narrative. President Trump announcing new import taxes, including 50% on kitchen cabinets, 30% on upholstered furniture, 25% on heavy trucks, and 100% on pharmaceutical drugs, unless their manufacturers are building plants here in the U.S. This now happening as an uptick in consumer spending helped the U.S. economy grow at a faster pace than what was previously expected. Commerce Data Department shows gross domestic growth expanded 3.8% from April through June. Past estimates for second quarter growth were 3.3%. The first quarter drop was caused by a surge in imports as businesses quickly brought in products under the tariff wire. Coming up, a big win for California universities, the new federal order demanding the Trump administration pay up. And Trump's would-be assassin convicted. Plus, our legal expert weighs in on what to expect next in the case for the suspect in Charlie Kirk's assassination. Continuing our team coverage, Kayla Gaskins joins us with a look at where political violence is trending in America.
Just before 7 a.m. Wednesday, a gunman opened fire at an ICE detention facility in Dallas. FBI Director Kash Patel releasing initial evidence pointing to a potential political motive by the shooter. Unspent shell casings engraved with the phrase anti-ICE.
This is just the most recent example of this type of attack.
It comes as the Center for Strategic and International Studies prepares to release an analysis where they found for the first time in more than 30 years, political violence by the far left has surpassed attacks by the far right. We spoke with one of the authors, Dan Byman.
The agenda of President Trump has caused tremendous outrage among many people on the extreme left.
Other examples of recent left-wing violence include the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk, the assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, the two attempted assassinations of President Donald Trump, first in Butler, Pennsylvania, then again at his golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida, and the shooting of a Texas police officer at an ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas.
His policies regarding immigration and the LGBTQ community, among others, are important issues for this community.
While the violence from the right has decreased dramatically, it hasn't disappeared. In June, an alleged assassin killed Minnesota state lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband.
Political violence has gotten out of control in this country. If you want to stop political violence, stop attacking our law enforcement as the Gestapo. If you want to stop political violence, stop telling your supporters that everybody who disagrees with you is a Nazi. If you want to stop political violence, look in the mirror. That's the way that we stop political violence in this country, and we've got to do it.
The recent political violence comes amid an exponential increase in threats against public officials, including local lawmakers, judges, and members of Congress. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The trial for the man who attempted to assassinate President Trump wrapped as the case against the suspect in Charlie Kirk's assassination is just beginning to take shape. This week, I spoke with former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani, to discuss. Before we get into all of that, let's just start with the Dallas ICE facility shooting today. A lot of late developments. Leaning on your experience as a former federal prosecutor, what would you be doing right now to uncover what happened and who else may be involved? Authorities came out saying that this is being investigated as an act of targeted violence.
No question, Didi. And another sad day in the United States, another day of more political violence. And we are seeing copycat violence. Apparently, this alleged shooter, who's now killed because of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, did inscribe anti-ICE messages on the shell casings. We don't know if he acted alone. If he did, as far as the legal case is concerned, that's really the end of it. You can't prosecute a dead person, but certainly if anyone helped him, there's co-conspirators, there's accessories, there's other principles, they can and should be prosecuted with terrorism, because it's pretty clear that this was a specific hit on ICE and DHS facilities.
And this coming just a day after we learned of the verdict in the Ryan Ruth, very bizarre case, I'd say. He is facing life in prison. Do you see any scenario where he appeals his conviction?
I don't think so, Dee. I mean, here's someone, like you said, very bizarre, who chose to represent himself. And really, it was a foregone conclusion. I mean, some of the arguments that he was making in trial really had no legal merit. So this is an attempted murder, an attempted assassination of a presidential candidate. And he was arguing that because he didn't pull the trigger, that was an attempt. Well, the law is pretty clear. He was plotting and planning this for weeks. He had burner phones. He got the ammunition. He was stalking. Now President Trump. So that's more than enough when it comes to a substantial step for murder.
A lot of shocking moments in the courtroom, and that carried out outside of the courtroom. Before I let you go, Tyler Robinson is facing charges in Charlie Kirk's assassination. He is reportedly in a special housing unit. What does that suggest about his state? And do you think the defense is trying to maybe set up some sort of appeal to avoid the death penalty?
Dee, yeah, we call it the SHU, the special housing unit, when someone is a danger to themselves and others. And he reportedly also threatened to commit suicide rather than turn himself in. So I think what the defense is going to do in this particular case is try to argue some sort of mitigation to save his life. There's plenty of evidence that he was the killer. Again, his DNA on the rifle and the towel. Obviously, we've all seen the surveillance videos and the videos of the assassination itself, one of the most disturbing I've ever seen. There's admissions on Discord, confessions to family members. So Tyler Robinson is the guy. The only question is he going to spend the rest of his life in Utah State Prison, or is he going to get the death penalty? So I think the defense is going to lean into that mitigation to try to save his life, Dee. That's really all they got.
A lot of questions about that, and he's reportedly back in court on Monday. Nima Rahmani, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the National News Desk.
Of course, Dee. Talk soon.
Two high-level Justice Department employees are accused of violating a federal judge's order limiting public opinions about the prosecution of accused killer Luigi Mangione. The employees allegedly reposted President Trump's statements about the case on social media. The judge has given the department until the end of next week to give an explanation. Mangione is charged in the fatal shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last year in New York City. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration to restore more than $500 million in research funding to UCLA. Earlier this year, the administration began investigations into California universities over claims of anti-Semitism on campus. It resulted in more than $580 million in research grants being blocked from UCLA. California's 10 UC campuses enroll 300,000 students. A nationwide movement called the Convention of States is picking up steam. And if 34 states pass resolutions, it would trigger the first ever Article 5 convention in U.S. history. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So one of the biggest headlines that I've been seeing is the possibility of President Trump running for another term. And obviously that would need a constitutional amendment. But just give us some context on this concept.
Yeah, so the Convention of States is a movement led by this group called Citizens for Self-Governance. Their whole goal is to use Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to call a state-led convention to propose amendments to the Constitution. So their main focus areas are kind of reining in federal spending, limiting government power, instituting term limits for Congress and also federal officials, which we know has yet to happen. They've tried for years.
And to my understanding, it's never been successfully used, has it? I mean, break down the process involved.
No, this would be the first time if they were able to get all of these different states to sign on. Like you said, it requires 34 states to pass resolutions to convene a convention. Right now, 19 states have passed resolutions to call a convention, and 8 more have passed them in one chamber within their state legislators. So if the convention finally gets called, they would need 38 states to actually ratify any proposed amendments before they become law. So quite the process.
Yeah, quite the process. Interesting, though, that, you know, the movement, it seems like it's gaining steam. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks.
A little later on, Emma will be back to break down the history and the reasoning behind Article 5 and the specific goals of the Convention of States movement. Coming up, the area is now in quarantine over the invasive spotted lanternfly, a new warning about this growing threat. Then the steps Seattle is taking to shield migrants from cuts to federal funding for food and housing. We'll be right back. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. And we started in Seattle, where the mayor is trying to shield immigrants from federal funding cuts.
Mayor Bruce Harrell says Seattle's status as a sanctuary city is under attack, and the funding cuts the federal government wants to implement would harm the most impoverished among us.
They target our immigrant and refugee neighbors and slash federal support to vital services, something as simple as how one can eat.
As President Donald Trump focuses on immigration enforcement, the mayor wants to spend an additional $4 million on programs that will help this community find work, housing, and legal assistance.
Seattle is choosing to stand with our communities and our values.
Homeless services would get a $9 million boost for emergency shelter services and hotel voucher programs, with another $4 million for rental assistance.
The director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture is putting out a hit on the spotted lanternfly.
Do your part. If you see them, don't be afraid to squish them.
The invasive species from Asia arrived in Pennsylvania in the 1990s and was first spotted in Ohio in 2020. Now it has spread across the state to the point where the ODA has quarantined 18 counties, including Hamilton, Franklin, and Montgomery, meaning nurseries must have their plants and trees inspected before shipping them to other counties.
Vines dying because of the spotted lanternfly pulling out sap from those vineyards and then expanding into other areas.
This rare discovery, a 1 in 30 million find, according to the New York Aquarium, part of the Wildlife Conservation Society. Kyle Brancato stumbled upon it while shopping at the Tops on Jefferson Road.
Walked by the lobster tank and I saw this bright orange lobster, very different from all the other ones in the tank.
Brancato knew he was looking at something special, and he decided to save it. Without experience caring for lobsters, he had to figure out how to keep it alive until help arrived. Volunteers from Humane Long Island agreeing to transport the animal several hours away. After several stops to check his safety along the way, the lobster arriving in Long Island appearing healthy late Sunday evening.
Amazon paying a historic settlement to Prime subscribers, and robot umpires called up to the big leagues. The new technology set to revolutionize Major League Baseball. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. Bill Nye the Science Guy receives a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The star was unveiled celebrating his impact on education, science, and entertainment. Major League Baseball will begin using robot umpires next year. The ABS system will allow each team to challenge an umpire's call at least twice a game. And also starting next month, Disney is raising the prices on most of its streaming service plans in the U.S. That includes most Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Select plans. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Amazon reaches a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission over claims the company tricked customers into signing up for its Prime membership program. The FTC sued Amazon in 2023, accusing the company of duping people into paying for subscriptions, then making it hard for them to cancel. Amazon will pay $1 billion in civil penalties and $1.5 billion to impacted customers, according to the FTC. It's one of the largest settlements in the agency's history. Amazon did not admit wrongdoing in the agreement. As the cost to attend college continues to rise, so do home prices in college towns. According to Redfin, the most expensive college town is Santa Barbara, California, where homes are sold for a median price of almost $2 million. Boca Raton, Florida, home to Florida Atlantic University, took the #2 spot, followed by Northern Arizona University's college town of Flagstaff, Arizona. While most college students are more likely to rent, higher home prices drive up local rental costs. Merriam-Webster added more than 5,000 new words to its 12th edition collegiate dictionary. Some of the additions are cold brew, hard pass, and adulting. The company also took out some sections like biographical entries and some obscure and old words. The last time the company came out with updates was 22 years ago. Still to come, a generational shift in American politics. The key demographic swinging towards the GOP as Democratic leadership struggles to keep up. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration.
President Trump addresses world leaders. His assessment of the United Nations job performance as he touts his America First agenda. Then,
the focus on the title it's distracting from areas where prevention can make a bigger difference.
questions remain surrounding a popular painkillers linked to autism. Doctors sound off with some important information for new moms. And a massive drug bust off America's coast. The haul the Coast Guard says is one for the record books. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and this week's gathering of world leaders in New York for the United Nations General Assembly showcasing some major divisions about priorities for the future. President Trump called on other leaders to follow his example of putting individual countries ahead of the needs of the world as a whole. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell.
At the United Nations, a packed agenda with global implications.
Do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I did.
President Donald Trump meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as Russia's war seeps into its 4th year with no end in sight.
Of the 7 wars that I stopped, I thought that would be the easiest because of my relationship with President Putin, which had always been a good one.
During a 56-minute speech centered around his America First agenda, Donald Trump blamed the UN for its push to fight climate change, which he called a hoax, and for its financial assistance for migrants coming to the United States.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration.
One of the most glaring examples of division between the United States and so many traditional allies was support for a Palestinian state. With Israel's war in Gaza resulting in the death of more than 64,000 people, most women and children, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry.
The United Kingdom formally recognizes the state of Palestine, a pledge to the Palestinian and Israeli people that there can be a better future.
President Trump on this matter has continued to side with Israel in its staunch opposition to a Palestinian state.
This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th, even while they refuse to release the hostages or accept a ceasefire.
President Trump was highly critical of Russia, once again threatening, quote, powerful tariffs if Russia doesn't make a deal to end the war. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is scheduled to speak on Saturday. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
The U.S. Secret Service says it quietly dismantled a massive hidden telecom network across New York City as nearly 150 world leaders gathered for the UN General Assembly. Officials say the system could have crippled cell towers, jammed 911 calls, and flooded networks. It is one of the largest communications threats thwarted on U.S. soil. According to one official, the network had the capacity to anonymously send 30 million text messages per minute.
These devices allowed anonymous encrypted communications between potential threat actors and criminal enterprises, enabling criminal organizations to operate undetected. This network had the potential to disable cell phone towers and essentially shut down the cellular network in New York City.
Investigators say they haven't revealed a direct plot to disrupt the assembly. There are no known credible threats to New York City at this time, and they are investigating if the devices are linked to a foreign government. The Transportation Department says it achieved its goal of hiring 2,000 air traffic controllers this fiscal year. In response to the ongoing shortage of critical air safety workers, the FAA increased starting controller academy trainee salaries by 30%. They also trimmed the hiring timeline by 4 months. The changes came following January's deadly mid-air collision between a regional jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter near our nation's capital. Taking a look over Capitol Hill, where congressional lawmakers sent a letter to Match, the parent company of Tinder, Hinge, and OkCupid, for information on fraudsters. The letter asks about Match's efforts to detect fake profiles used to string along victims, then ask for gifts or money. The FBI says victims lose hundreds of millions of dollars per year on romance scams. Match has until October 15th to respond. Americans are more likely today to say immigrants benefit the country and they contribute to economic growth than they were last year. An Associated Press New York survey found fewer U.S. adults say legal immigration should be reduced today than in January, 32% versus 23%. And compared to March 2024, more Americans say immigrants contribute to economic growth. More also say they enrich American culture and values and take jobs Americans don't want. The U.S. Coast Guard uncovering a massive drug bust in the Western Caribbean Sea. The crew seized over 5 tons of narcotics, including 8,700 pounds of cocaine worth more than $64 million earlier this month. The team also seized 1,500 pounds of marijuana in August. All the drugs were headed to the U.S. but are now being offloaded, cataloged as evidence, and will be eventually destroyed. Another warning for Democrats. A new report found young voters drifting away, with Gen Z now the most pro-Republican generation on record. The National News Desk, Angelo explains.
A new report that reads like a horror story for Democrats, with one line sending shockwaves through political circles. Gen Z is currently the most pro-GOP generation alive by registration. The headline comes fresh from Decision Desk HQ and is sparking a national conversation about why.
There's one big difference with the Republicans and the Democrats as it pertains to Gen Z men, which is the Republicans put in effort to bargain with young men and the Democrats don't.
The numbers back them up. Democratic registration is sliding. Young white men down to 29% compared to 49% in past generations. Young non-white men now just 54%. Even legacy Democrats are sounding the alarm.
The fact that we can't lay out clearly and succinctly that we are not for biological men playing in girls' sports, we have to all say that as a party for us to be listened to, I think, and with any credibility, with any seriousness on what we want to do on health care and what we love to do on the economy.
Here's why this report is hitting a nerve. Registration is the foundation of power. When young people switch parties, elections can shift. We saw this in 2024, as political scientist Dr. Sharon Austin points out.
The election would have had a different outcome even in 2024 if more younger voters had turned out, and even some younger voters that traditionally would have voted for Democrats voted for Donald Trump.
The drift right does not erase support for liberal issues. For example, a spring 2025 Yale poll found voters are slightly against letting people who cross illegally stay here in the U.S. However, for young voters, they back allowing asylum seekers to remain in the U.S. by about 25 points. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
House and Senate Democrats are demanding more information after the Department of Justice ended a corruption investigation into White House border czar Tom Homan. He allegedly accepted $50,000 from an undercover FBI agent in exchange for agreeing to help win federal contracts in a second Trump administration. The New York Times reports the encounter in September of 2024 was recorded on audio tape in letters sent to top Justice Department and FBI officials. Democrats want the recordings handed over to Congress and made public.
This was another example of the weaponization of the Biden Department of Justice against one of President Trump's strongest and most vocal supporters in the midst of a presidential campaign.
FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche have said the investigation found no credible evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. 19 states have passed resolutions calling for a convention of states, and 8 more have passed it in at least one chamber. If 34 states agree to call a convention, it would be the first time in history Americans have invoked Article 5 of the Constitution. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team, and I know you dug into the history of all of this and the purpose of Article 5. It seems to me to institute kind of like a system of checks and balances, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. They really wanted a way for the people through the states to bypass Congress if the federal government ever became too powerful or refused to limit itself. So the concern was that Congress might never voluntarily pass amendments that restricted its own authority, and they really haven't when you look at things like term limits that have been discussed for decades and never passed. So Article 5 was really the safety valve, a way for the states to kind of rein in this federal overreach if needed.
And speaking of term limits, you hinted at this. I know there was a bill in the works in Congress.
Yeah.
What's the latest?
Yeah, so it was Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Ralph Norman. They both introduced a constitutional amendment in both the Senate and the House that would limit U.S. senators to 2 6-year terms and members of the House of Representatives to 3 2-year terms. So the proposed amendment would not retroactively apply to current members of Congress. The clock would start ticking after the amendment's enactment, which would be later on. But yeah, it seems like it's gained a bit of traction, but only time will tell if they decide to approve this.
Yeah, very true on that. Emma, thank
Thanks.
you. For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. So to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from former Vice President Kamala Harris's book to the fallout from the attack on that Texas ICE facility.
And welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. A shooting at a Dallas ICE facility this past week is being investigated as a targeted attack. The shooting comes as a new report on political violence shows a shift in the ideology of the majority of the perpetrators. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, you spoke to one of the authors of that report from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. What did he tell you?
We did, Steve. So he said for the first time in more than 30 years, from their analysis, they found left-wing violence has surpassed right-wing attacks. Now, we spoke with Dan Byman. He's one of the senior fellows at CSIS, and he said the inflection point where things started to change were in 2016.
The agenda of President Trump has caused tremendous outrage among many people on the extreme left. His policies regarding immigration and the LGBTQ community, among others, are important issues for this community.
Now, Byman did note that it can sometimes be hard to categorize these attacks because individuals' motives aren't always clear. But in recent cases of left-wing violence, the suspects did leave behind some evidence that gave some indirection and pointed towards their political feelings, such as the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk, the assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, who was allegedly shot by Luigi Mangione, the two attempted assassinations of President Donald Trump, first in Butler, Pennsylvania, and then at his golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida, and then the most recent shooting of the police officer at the ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas. Now, violence on the right has decreased, but it hasn't disappeared altogether. In June, we saw the assassination of the Minnesota lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband. Now, some critics say that this is all because of a rise in heated rhetoric, and they're encouraging everyone on both sides to tone it down.
National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, thank you. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris's book, 107 Days, about her 2024 campaign was released this past week, and it's ruffling a lot of feathers. But national correspondent Matt Galka, it's not just Republicans who are upset with Harris. Some of her fellow Democrats are irritated with her, too.
Yeah, some of the most vocal critics of the book are her fellow Democrats, some anonymously, but some publicly, too. The book takes a peek behind the curtain of that short run for president that ultimately saw the former vice president losing to Donald Trump and leaving the Democratic Party searching for some answers. She's been promoting the book, saying it was reckless for her not to step in sooner and have a conversation with former President Biden about not running, and that's been met with a lot of criticism. One of her stops this week was on the show The View, the same place where during the campaign she said she wouldn't do anything different than Biden, a line that was used against her leading up to the election.
I'm a loyal person, and I didn't fully appreciate how much people wanted to know there was a difference between me and President Biden. I thought it was obvious. And I didn't want to offer a difference in a way that would be received or suggested to be a criticism.
She's going to have to answer to how she was in the room and yet never said anything publicly.
Now, former Obama advisor David Axelrod told Politico that the book and its details were a bad political strategy, but Harris herself hasn't said much about her own political future, only saying for now she's focused on the book tour.
National correspondents Matt Galka, Kayla Gaskins, thank you both for your great reporting and your hard work. Back to you.
The U.S. has become a major beneficiary of foreign investment in the last few years. New research from McKinsey Global Institute shows growth in foreign direct investment is coming from innovative industries in an advanced country, building out capacity in another advanced country. The value of investment into the U.S. and Canada was 89% higher since 2022 than in the 2015 to 2019 period. That's according to an analysis of 200,000 FDI projects. And the White House announcement linking a common pain reliever to autism is raising a lot of questions. Medical reporter Liz Bonis shares some important answers for new moms.
Hey there, everybody. Healthcare providers pushing back a little bit today on a potential connection between acetaminophen and autism. Those who work with families of those living with this condition are especially concerned about moms who are expecting or those who already have children with autism.
Autism is first and foremost a social communication condition.
Dr. Amir Miodovnik is a developmental behavioral pediatrician who specializes in diagnosing and treating children with autism from all across the country. He says several studies, including one recently from the National Institutes of Health, show no causal link in pregnancy or exposure before birth between neurodevelopmental disorders and acetaminophen, the common fever-reducing, pain-relieving ingredient in Tylenol. So if I am a mom expecting a baby right now, what is it that you want me to know about acetaminophen and autism?
The focus on the Tylenol it's distracting from areas where prevention can make a bigger difference.
Since most of the acetaminophen, he says, is recommended by a woman's doctor in pregnancy, when a fever hits, not bringing that fever down can also be associated with autism.
In fact, there have been studies that have shown that fevers, especially early pregnancy, have been associated with neurodevelopmental outcomes, autism included.
The makers of Tylenol releasing this statement about this research as well. Acetaminophen is the safest pain reliever option for pregnant women as needed throughout their entire pregnancy. So I had to ask, are there other factors that you feel may play more of a role even than something like this painkiller?
We've looked at phthalates, we've looked at BPA, we've looked at the fluorinated acids. These are all things that are released into our environment and are difficult to avoid.
Now, even the World Health Organization weighed in on this today, saying there is no evidence this painkiller causes autism, and the recommendations for women who are pregnant, those recommendations have not changed. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
A city council member in a war of words with local police officers. The threats and verbal altercation caught on camera, and securing places of worship, a Florida city's new plan to protect its constituents and religious organizations. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America. And we start in Utah, where a councilman is resigned after threatening to defund local police.
Justin, I promise you, I will do everything in my power as a city council member to make sure these guys are defunded. There will be 5 police officers in this town because this is unbelievable.
This police body camera footage was given to us by the Herald Journal, and it shows Smithfield City Council member Ted Stokes fuming at officers, threatening to shrink the 12-person police force, along with criticizing and mocking them.
Why are you here? He's asking you which car is involved. Yeah, I want to know why there's 2 officers responding to such a simple thing. We pay a lot of money for you guys in this city. Okay. And I decide whether the budget's good or not.
Police say the officers were responding to a complaint after Stokes' son hit a parked car and damaged both vehicles earlier that day. Councilman Stokes sent us this apology where he apologized to the council and the officers involved. He said his unprofessional conduct violated a canon of ethics.
Have a better day. See ya.
using a paint sprayer, floodlights, and a generator. David Castro and Kristen Hoover from Oklahoma started the project at 8 p.m. Saturday and finished about 7 Sunday morning. Hoover says the tribute is meant to inspire unity regardless of your political beliefs.
The Cadillac Ranch gives us a spot to where we can practice freedom of speech. And growing up as an artist, there's a lot of places that I wasn't supposed to paint and I could get in trouble for painting. And so that was a place that we could go to and, practice that without any fear. And I would hope that other places would kind of follow along and allow context from both sides, just like Charlie would want.
Castro says they used 15 gallons of paint and they chose Old Glory Red, which is the same color of the red stripes on the U.S. flag.
Leaders of churches, synagogues, mosques, and others feel security is necessary in places of worship.
We're living in some perilous times where the church is a sanctuary still, but to some people it's not a sanctuary or a holy place. So we have to be able to protect our parishioners that will come into worship service or just come to meetings in general.
Senator Don Gates says he is introducing new legislation to make it easier for these places to feel more secure. The bill requires volunteers to follow a sheriff-approved security plan, complete a background check, and hold a valid Florida concealed weapon or firearm license. But the church would not have to have the state security license.
So this is expanding gun rights and making it clear that, unfortunately, our houses of worship who want to be protected have to have a way of being protected and have the state approve it.
Coming up, an interstellar space mission on its way, where it's headed and what scientists hope to learn. Also, how the NFL could break its contract with all of its media partners as soon as next year. Three new missions to track space weather launched aboard a SpaceX rocket this week. The rocket is carrying 2 spacecraft for NASA and 1 for NOAA. The missions focus on solar wind, how it affects Earth and interstellar space, and provides warnings on solar storms. Their destination is a region about 1 million miles from Earth. The spacecraft is expected to arrive in January. NASA says its next crewed Artemis moon mission could launch as soon as next year. The space agency says its Artemis 2 mission is set to launch no later than April. The 10-day mission is expected to take 4 astronauts around the moon. NASA says this will be the closest approach to the moon in 50 years. It's supposed to pave the way for the Artemis 3, a crewed landing of Americans on the moon. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell says the league could begin renegotiating its media deals as soon as next year. In an interview with CNBC, Goodell cited recent massive media deals for the NBA and NHL, adding that he believed the NFL is leaving a lot of money on the table. The NFL inked an 11-year, over $100 billion media rights deal in 2021 that included an opt-out after the 2029-2030 season. The league would need approval from all of its current media partners to begin discussions on a new agreement. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check our local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton here in Washington, and from all of us here, we hope you have a great week.